back there. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Are we ready? Great. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Timmy. I'm an organizer with Chicago Dissenters and Dissenters in general, and with the planning team of the GNC, the Genocidal National Convention Counter Conference. And I'm happy to kick off and introduce our session that we're about to have, which is called End Perpetual Punishment, from the Illinois Murder Registry to Death by Incarceration. I'm gonna go ahead and just give our panelists a chance to just introduce themselves. Maybe you can just go in a line. And we'll start with Javier over here. Would you give it up for our panelists?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Javier Reyes, and I am the CEO and founder of Challenge to Change. It's an organization that's based out of Aurora, Illinois, that deals with exactly the topic that we're discussing today.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Wilson-Bretz, and I'm a senior organizer at the Chicago Torture Justice Center.
Mark Clemens, senior organizer, Chicago Torture Justice Center, and torture survivor.
I'm Naji Ubelis, Chicago Torture Justice Center case manager and director of community navigation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, y'all, for being here and folks who are online. Really quick about the format today. We're going to be talking about the Illinois Murder Registry and CTJC's campaign to repeal it, building communities, not prisons, which Javi will talk about, a little bit about connections to U.S. imperialism, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. If you can't hear us at any point or see the screen, please raise your hand or otherwise get our attention and we'll address it. Okay, I'm gonna kick us off by just talking a little bit about who CTJC is and then some facts about the murder registry. So some of you might know, some of you might not know. The Chicago Torture Justice Center came out of a decades-long movement for reparations of survivors of police torture, specifically John Burge, who tortured people from the early 70s to the early 90s. So the reparations package in 2015, which was the first of its kind for any form of racially motivated police violence in the US. Many things came out of that package, but CTJC was one of them. And so our mission is that CTJC seeks to address the traumas of police violence and institutionalized racism through access to healing and wellness services, trauma-informed resources, and community connection. The center is part of and supports a movement to end all forms of police violence, and I would argue state violence as well. So we do kind of four main things. This is just for generally folks to know as a resource as well in Chicago and for folks other places too even. We have a reentry team that's really amazing. We do case management and community navigation. We have free therapy and counseling for survivors of any form of state violence and their families. And then we have an organizing team, which is Mark and myself. We currently have two campaigns, one to get torture survivors out of prison, and then the murder registry campaign, which we're here to talk about today. So why abolish the Illinois Murder Registry? We're gonna be talking about all these points today, but just to start us off, right? It keeps people in a cycle of criminalization and surveillance. It makes the reentry process even more challenging for people coming home from prison. It does nothing to support public safety, and arguably it destabilizes our communities. It's racist and classist, and the money it raises and costs the state could fund our communities instead. So a little bit of background, right? The first registry for quote unquote violent crimes in Illinois was the Sex Offense Registry, which was created in 1986 in Illinois. Later in the 2000s, people with quote unquote non-sexual violent crimes against youth were added to the Sex Offense Registry, even if their crime was not considered sexually motivated. And then in 2012, the Illinois Murder Registry was created. And that's for adults who also have quote unquote violent crimes. And I quote that because violent crimes is a made up category, right? The Illinois Murder Registry is formerly known as the Murder and Violent Offender Against Youth Registry, even though only half of those listed have victims that are under the age of 18. And most of the crimes that require people to register are actually not murder, right? But we know they use this language of murder and youth, right, as very inflammatory language. So now it's one of 5 in all across the country in other states of these sort of violent offender registries. And part of the reason why it's important for us to be talking about this is not obviously only the impact, which we're going to be talking about today, but also because registries are growing in popularity nationally. There's talk at the national level to create a national domestic violence registry. There's talk in Illinois of creating a domestic violence registry, right? And they're basically just trying to surveil, right, and keep people as much as possible and keep as many people as possible in cycles of criminalization to make the reentry process even harder, to stigmatize them, right? And we're gonna be talking more about all the ways in which that happens. Some other key facts, people have to register annually for the murder registry, or weekly if they are houseless. And they only get notified as they're coming out of prison that they have to do this. So they don't get notified every year, right, when they have to register. So of course, many people miss their registration date and then they get a failure to register charge. And for some people, that means they have to literally start over the 10-year period of registration, right? So they could be at 9 years of registering, miss their registration date, and then have to do another 10 years after that. For many people, right, a failure to register charge means getting rearrested, right, can mean all types of things. Also, people's addresses, their names, their dates of birth, and their photos are all listed publicly, right, which Najee's going to talk a little bit more about how that impacts people. But, and then people have to notify the police, right, if they even leave for a few days, right? There's huge levels of surveillance. And then it impacts everyone in the house, right? Because police can go to someone's house at any time without a warrant who's on the Illinois Murder Registry, right? So we've heard stories of this impacting, right, loved ones, partners, children, right? All those types of things, because police come in the middle of the night for absolutely no reason, just because someone is on this registry. And there are currently over 8,200 people who are on the registry, so it impacts a really significant amount of people in Illinois. This is my last slide, and I'm going to hand it off. But the biggest question, right, that people kind of ask is, well, we need this for public safety, right? People, broadly, I think it's the rates that I've read of polls is 95% of people support public conviction registries, right? People support it bipartisan. They're generally very supported. Because I think they provide people an illusion of safety and control, right? So people think, okay, I can look up people that live next to me, right? I can know who to stay away from, right? But I think a lot of folks in this room know, right, that that's not how harm works, right? And that's not how violence prevention works, right? These things, often people who harm us, right, are people that we know, right? And that's surveilling people, right? The state surveilling people is not keeping anyone safe. And there's actually 25 years of research, predominantly around the sex offense registry, that proves that that's not the case, right? It doesn't lower recidivism, it doesn't prevent violence or reduce rates of violence within the community, right? Because it doesn't actually get at the root cause of violence. And shout out to the Chicago 400. We got Jordan over here, who's going to be an organizer with them soon. They're a group that's been fighting to get rid of the sex offense registry in Illinois for a long time as well. And we deeply support their work and the work to get rid of all registries, because we know that they don't keep us safe, right? We keep us safe. And then really quick, the social issues, right, that we must be addressed, as I'm talking about, right? If we actually want to address violence, we have to resource our communities. We have to address cultures of domination and oppression, right? None of that is happening with these registries. And in fact, most people who are harmed, right, are harmed by people who are not on these registries, right? Illinois, just so folks know, has one of the most robust registry systems in the country now. We actually have 5 different registries. So we've got the sex offender registry, the murder and violent offender registry. We have a methamphetamine manufacturer registry, an arson registry, and a gun offender registry. So it's growing and growing all the time, right? And we need work that's trying to get rid of all of them. Because again, they keep folks in these cycles. So yeah, right? Ultimately, right, the money, the energy, all of these things that go into these factless laws could instead be going to actual prevention and public safety strategies. And I'm going to pass it off to Mark.
Man, I forgot my own mic. Good afternoon, you wonderful people. My name is Mark Clemens. I am a torture survivor, as I've stated. And what I would like to speak upon is John Burge. John Burge and police officers trained under him over hundreds of particular people, and please forgive me. Commander John Burge and police officers trained under him tortured hundreds of people predominantly young black people into false confessing to murders from 1972 until approximately 1991. John Burge operated primarily at areas 2 and 3 violent crimes units, even though tortures occurred at area 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the city of Chicago. And people are just going to be mad at me. I can barely talk with this mask, but I'm going to make it work. And at Logan Square. Logan Square is a police station that is generally known as a black site, where that hundreds of black and brown people were taken to these to this police station, and they were tortured. At least 2 of them wound up dead. Today, the majority of people tortured by Burge and his disciples still have felony convictions for murder, and all of them have been forced to register on the Illinois Murder Registry. Almost all of the sites where individuals have been forced to register since the creation of the murder registry have been sites where individuals have been tortured. So for a good example, I was tortured at Area 3 Violent Crimes, which is located 39th in California. It's no longer at 39th in California, it's Weston and Belmont. Well, while on the Illinois State Murder Registry, I had to enter into that police station to register or else risk being sent back to prison. This process traumatizes torture survivors and is an absolute failure by the city of Chicago to be accountable to them and to right the wrong of the past. You can click on it. Thank you. An issue of racial justice. Let me tell you, try all predominantly black and Latino individuals that were tortured under John Burge, with most of them, guess what? Still dealing with their criminal convictions, despite the city of Chicago giving reparations and stating that men as well as females were taken to police stations and tortured. 60% of the people on the Illinois Murder Registry are black. Only 12.4% of Illinois population is black. 1 out of every 84 black men in Illinois is on the sex offender registry. So that's a hell of a lot of people to be on the sex registry. The endless punishment and surveillance that is now a routine part of the criminal legal system disappropriately impacts black people and communities. It is clear that the repealing of this legislation is an issue of racial justice. And once again, I apologize. This mask is crazy as hell. Those of you who have heard me speak, you already know I have no problem speaking. The 2021 census data of poverty rates in Chicago mapped here shows that some communities that are being targeted by stop and frisk and the murder registry experiencing the highest rates of poverty. People on the Illinois Murder Registry have to pay and take hours out of their days to register. Therefore, this registry is making people poorer. This means the Illinois Murder Registry is also an issue of economic justice. And I always throw out my appeal. I'm asking you young people, let me tell you, I'm old now, okay? I used to make a lot of goddamn noise, can't quite do it anymore. I'm asking you to have a heart and to get involved with this particular issue.
I think it's Tanaj.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. He's very passionate, I guess y'all can see. Right off the bat, show me the money. You know, it's easy for us to say, can everybody hear me? Okay, there we go. It's easy for everyone to just say like, oh yeah, we probably do need this because what it is, it just strikes fear in you. And instead of like looking at stuff and analyzing yourself, fear outweighs logical thinking. So I understand. And the bottom line is the money. They want to find money, almost $1 billion, 800 million annually. Are you serious? And it's from poor people. So when you think about this, poor people who already been disadvantaged, tortured, some may have committed the crime as kids or whatever otherwise, and for those who have been targeted, just as myself, in torture, abuse, in prison, things of that nature. I spent 25 years in prison as a kid, and most of us were kids. So when you think about the money, that's the bottom line. Because just think about this, about marijuana. Oh, now it's legal. What happened? They jumped right on it. The only people who was able to get it was rich people. That was it. Rich white folks. That's what happened. While myself and others, and I wasn't even smoking marijuana, if they just say it's in your car and they're going to snatch it. They're going to take it. So it's a smack in the face to get out, and now I have to do a registry. And even with this registry, the money that I'm trying to make, that I'm working on, is supposed to go to transportation, goes to my family, goes to this, goes to that, but no, I got to make sure that I take it to them at the registry. And it says, according to Illinois Murder Registry legislation, all registration fees are deposited into the Offender Registration Fund. It makes it sound so good on the Offender Registration Fund. We doing some good. No, what you're doing is you trying to take water out of a turnip. Ain't that what my grandma used to say that? Why are you squeezing people that already don't have anything? If they get a driver's license, a state license, whatever, they got a social security number, you can find them anywhere you want. No, you want to be able to target them. And when you target people specifically just for the monetary gain, because in prison, what they used to do, and they still do, what they do is when someone come there and it's full now, but there's no one in segregation, guess what they're going to do? They're going to find people to put in seg, because they got a bunch of people that's coming off the street that they made sure that they violated parole in some way because of the registry. And in keeping that in mind, talking about my testimony, I have a personal testimony, not just of myself, but also of other people dealing with the registry. Just as Mark Clemens said so eloquently, he said that when you go to some of these places, these young kids who was 15, 16, 17, 18, where they was tortured at, they have to go back there to register. And once you go in, they strip you. And one incident just took me it's still unbelievable. It was a guy that came, because I take people to the registry. They would not, a lot of them would not go by themselves. I go by myself. I'm still on the registry. I go by myself, but I still let people know where I'm at. Even the people I work with, I let them know where I'm at. I'm registering today, so you don't hear from me in a couple hours. They kidnap me, because that's what they do. So the guy went in. The officer told him, what, you think you're not going to go to jail because you brought your son? True story. He said, well, I couldn't do nothing else. You got to call somebody. He called his son's mother. She come up there. They told her, you don't have the proper ID. We out looking at it. The guy I brought with me. He already registered, but he looking at me, I'm ready to go. So what I do, I'm like, man, what happened with him? It's nothing to do with you. I'm like, okay. So she went back. They called DCFS. Gang came and got that young boy. He looked like he was probably about 5 or 6. because they was arresting his father. That was just crazy. But myself, I was in an accident on the expressway. It was already scary enough. Someone cut me off, ran into the wall. Long story short, I was on the other end, face bleeding, confused. 2 other people that was involved, they came to my aid. Illinois State Police came. He was like, okay, you need an ambulance? I said, yeah, call the ambulance. Car tore up. So he said that, yeah, I'm gonna call him. And then when I started seeing the ISP pulling up, I said, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm trying to hit my phone to go live or call somebody or something. I forgot I got Siri getting pulled over on my phone. But anyway, I hit it, and then they pulled up, surrounded me, and was like, hey, you not complying on your registry. I said, are you serious? I'm bleeding out my face. I mean, you talking about a registry? Well, we're gonna have to, so what I had to do is, I'm gonna make it just real quick. I always take this with me, because this is the paper that I sign, and they sign, officers, wherever you at, they sign it. Yeah, I got my slave papers from the 13th Amendment, of course. So I got my slave papers right here, and this is what saved me from not going to jail over the weekend, because I had it in my hand. I gave it to him. He quickly refused it. I say, just look at it. That's all, just look at it. They was ready to just put me in the cage. So they looked at it, seen the officer, called him. The officer confirmed it. Yes, it takes a month. It takes at least a month to update to the Illinois State Police website. A whole month. How many people went to jail for that? Because it didn't update. I just so happen to have my paper on me that I carry all the time. And they called it, and this was saved me. And yeah, they still didn't give me no ambulance. They just left. And a friend of mine, well, I'll say some people that I know were killed, because I can't say how I know this, but because of, you know, you can just go on the website, locate where a person live at, and you can pull up on them. It's easy. They know this. They know that. So why you gotta have such, and that's another reason why your own family who loves you don't want you to parole to their house. They don't want you to live there. People you love, your own family, they don't want you to live there because they're worried about the police kicking the door in or anyone else. So it's perpetual that you have to deal with. And one last thing, just recently, a person was told, an officer told him, if you sign this paper saying that you was late, you agreed to start your 10 years over again. He was signing for the murder registry. He agreed. I told him you should have never done that, because only the judge can decide. But that's how they keep entrapping you. And it updates automatically 10 more years if your date is missed for anything. They can tell you to come back later. And you come back later, they're closed. The next day, you missed.
We're going to pass it over to Javi to talk about building communities, not prisons.
Thank you. Both of you guys hit it right on the nose with the murder registry. A good friend of ours, as you know, Harry Peña, he missed, on his 9th year, he missed the murder registry by 1 day because his daughter was having a baby, and that's a crazy time. He's happy, and it's that simple that he can forget. And even though he went and talked and called and showed, his whole 10 years started all over again. And we're talking about a person who's a staple in his community, who runs one of the largest reentry facilities, housing, food, resources in the Hermosa district, who's been a law-abiding citizen, taxpayer, a grandfather, a husband, a good neighbor, for the past 9 years, and just an oversight of bringing forth his brand new grandbaby, it slipped. And there's no one, like he said, there's no one that you can talk to that's gonna say, because the system automatically does it. And if we know how government works, they're strictly on policies, but as soon as you get them, oh, it's a different thing. Yeah. But if you violate any norms or anything like that, you're gonna pay the highest price. But going to building communities, not prisons. I'm going to read you their mission statement because it's truly important. Building communities, not prisons, is dedicated to fostering safer, healthier communities by investing in education, economic opportunity, and restorative justice rather than incarceration. We aim to break the cycle of criminalization by empowering individuals and creating systems that support rehabilitation and community development. Even if you're going to go get a loan from a bank for a house, you have to go through so much and show that this is a property, have an inspector come and do all of these things before a bank will release money. But our governor just gave almost $1 billion without a plan, without anyone requesting or saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do A, B, and C. We're going to include A, B, and C. None of that was said. But still, almost $1 billion was given to rebuild prisons without even considering the impact this would have on everybody as a whole. And we're not only talking about building prisons, we're talking about incarcerating our future. We're talking about we're going to build a place that can potentially continue to incarcerate black and brown kids. I'm going to give you a little a background on why this started. And then Jimmy Soto has the longest false incarceration in the country, in the world. 42 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Him and his cousin, David Ayala. They were arrested both at 18 and 20. They're both now 60 and 62. I picked them up from Stateville Prison. The last time I saw Jimmy, it was in 1988. I was 18 years old. I was already 2 years in prison. I walked through the halls of a prison that resembled a castle. I got incarcerated at the age of 16. So being in a place like that, it really didn't help my development as a kid. I walked in halls where people died. People still think that prison should be glorified in my community and stuff like that because it's been part of our culture for so long. We celebrated someone that went to jail or came home. But on June 19th, a 51-year-old man by the name of Michael Broadway died in Stateville in the upper galleries because he couldn't breathe. He was fighting for his release on a false conviction. Another person that has claimed his innocence since his arrest. And he died because of negligence by the people who swore that they are to protect him as when he's doing his time. We fail as a society to view the process of when you're incarcerated. When the judge sentences you to whatever time he doesn't sentence you to be tortured. You're paying a debt to society, which we all have come to learn, that has interest that never goes away. Even though we pay that debt with body, mind, and soul, that debt continues to exist because we'll never pay that interest off on that debt. And there's a paper trail, which we call a murder registry, and I want to show you a data that's out. There's 3,633 people on the murder registry that includes men, women, and juveniles. From the age of 11, I was on another registry, a gang registry. 11. The same officers under Byrd who were trained to terrorize black and brown communities because they almost felt like it was like a hunting ground for them. Because every time I came out of a gang, I wasn't looking for an enemy, I was looking for the police. So every time I walked from my cousin's house on Mozart and Augusta to Francisco and Walton, I got stopped maybe 4 or 5 times by different police officers asking me what gang I was in. And every time I said I wasn't in a gang, I got a slap in the face or a punch in the stomach. Until I finally said, yeah, I'm in a gang at the age of 11. I wasn't in a gang, but that stopped him from beating me up every time he saw me. So from going from him stopping me every time he saw me with my cousins, now I started to get pulled into the police station anytime a crime happened in that community. Because I was in a database where they had my address and can go pick me up in my community to stand in a lineup. We tend to, well, we not us here, but people have desensitized from what's really happening in our communities by saying, I didn't know. And just like both of them pointed out with the youth, this is your story to take forward of what you guys see. What you guys are learning by being part of what's actually happening now. Social media has made it so readily available where you cannot get out of a car and beat someone half to death and just throw him in the back of the car and say he died of his injuries. Or he tried to run. They can't do that no more. So now with this availability and this information that's out there, then we have a conscious obligation to either stand for this or just kind of be part of the problem. You can't say that you don't know anymore. No one can. Because what happens all the way in a little remote country in the Congo, we know about it all the way over here. So every time a black or brown kid or anybody is killed under the guise of law enforcement, institutions that incarcerate you, everyone knows about it. I'm going to read a little a background here for you guys. It says on June 15, Michael Broadway died while in custody at Stateville after Illinois Department of Correction medical staff failed to treat him as he struggled to breathe in deadly heat. We talked to the guys that were in there. The nurse stopped on the 3rd floor and said she couldn't make it up there because she was already out of breath. She said she could not go up there because she was out of breath. So you have the guys on the gallery yelling, saying, hey, he can't breathe. They're beating on their bars in a desperation that if you were to hear these yells and scream, like I don't hear them now because I wasn't there, but I heard them when I was there. So it was the same screams of desperation when someone falls out in a cell and no one comes. So they yelled and screamed for them to come up there saying he's having issues breathing. He was still alive at this time. And they did nothing. The conditions up on that gallery, all the vents are closed. They're sealed shut. They do that in the winter because it's too cold. but they don't care about opening them back up because of how hard it is to climb up there and do it. And keep in mind, no one is doing it for free. Someone's getting paid to unlodge a window and open it. I go here. It said, "We will not stand by while our people are subjected to death through neglect and abuse. Governor Pritzker must stop his recently announced plans to rebuild Stateville and Logan prisons. Instead of spending nearly $1 billion to build more prisons, we demand immediate pathways for release of our community members who continue to face dehumanizing, deplorable conditions in Stateville." I want to go to another fact here. Because I like to do research on numbers. There's Illinois has the most overturned convictions in this country. Illinois, the most overturned convictions. And in 2022 alone, there were 238 exonerations, right? There's the capacity in Stateville, you can house up to 1,200 people, and I think they're at, what, 380, 400? That's the amount of people that were exonerated. So, Governor Pritzker, you have over 1,000 clemencies, petitions sitting on your desk. 3,000. I stand corrected. 3,000. That would empty out 4, 5, 6 prisons if he were to answer those petitions. Knowing that Illinois has the highest rate of exonerations, of false convictions, of torture. This is not something that I'm making up. There's not a boogeyman in my closet. Burge was the boogeyman in my community. He was the one I was scared of, and everybody that was trained under him. We already know Governor Pritzker has announced his $1 billion to this stuff. I shared with a young lady that was coming in today. We can build a new building, right? Because that's what they're saying. Let's build a new prison. And I move in, but all my furniture and clothes are infested with cockroaches. The building is brand new, state of the art, right? Cockroaches can live through a nuclear war. So if I take those cockroaches, what's going to happen to that brand new, beautiful building? It'll be infested with cockroaches. So no one is talking about changing the culture of the staff in these prisons. There's no discussion on how we as a civilized society are not going to allow this to continue to happen. If we can invest on the structure, which is brick and mortar and pipes and stuff like that, why are we not investing in humans and people that can impart love, that can impart wisdom, and that can raise a village? And it says, the quarterly report, where did I go? The Illinois Department of Corrections later quarterly report revealed that every single prison in the Illinois system is operating under capacity. Right? Operating under capacity. Just like Stateville. They're spending, I don't know an exact number, but I'll say they're spending $1 million to operate that on a monthly basis if it was at max capacity at 1,200. They're operating at a third of that. But there's enough guards for 12,000 people, for 1,200 people. That doesn't change. We're still running a prison as if it was at max capacity, and we're doing that through all the state of Illinois. So if it takes $2 million to run this prison at the capacity that they're at right now, they're still running it as there's 1,200 people in there. So that's a waste of our money. that I go to work for and get extracted on taxes to support something that I have no qualms with dismantling. We have people dying in these prisons, and it's not only because of heat. We have medical conditions that are subpar. We have people that go undiagnosed with cancer who come home and die a year later because of long lengths of stays in prison where medical was subpar. Where if you went there with a problem, you were told to drink water, or if you're not bleeding, well, I can't help you. And for you to get sent out to get checked by a real doctor, it's slim to none. You would have to get stabbed. You would have to get beat, like beyond recognition, to be able to go out. But if you complain of a legitimate pain, or I don't feel right, I found this lump, what is it? No, go back to your cell, inmate. You guys can be anywhere today, but you're here. Anywhere. It's beautiful outside. It's not that hot. But you chose to be here. So don't let this message stay here. Take it with you. Share it with somebody. The next conversation you have, let it be what you heard today, and see how you can have someone, even if they don't agree with you, take a look at what we're talking about. It's not a secret. Again, we're not a society that's in the 18 or 1900s. We have the technology to be able to foster, safe communities, and it's not through incarceration. I promise you, it's not through incarceration. I'm part of the Northwestern NPEP program, and I'm also a Northwestern Fellow. We have a 98% success rate of anyone who participates in the NPEP program. No one is returning back to prison who has an associate's or bachelor's degree. No one is going back to prison knowing that they can come out here and live a decent and normal life, an education which is denied for so many. And one last thing I'll say, I talked to this kid that was, his last grade that he completed out here was the 6th grade, because he couldn't go to another school to do 7th and 8th because it was in an opposition neighborhood, and even though it was just a block and a half away. He couldn't go to school because he feared he was going to get killed. He told me the safest place to go to school, if you live in the inner cities in Chicago, is prison. The safest place, if you live in my communities, to go to school is in prison, because you don't have to go through neighborhoods where people are going to shoot at you. So you have a lot of people in the prison system through Northwestern, DePaul, Loyola, Lewis University, so many programs in prison now that are offering the opportunity to have a higher education, to give you an opportunity to make better choices, to be able to seek an understanding of how the system works. Because a lot of the times, I'm not having this conversation at home over dinner of the importance that it is to vote, or who my alderman is, or where money goes to. None of those conversations are being had at my house. But now with higher education in prison, they're exposed to these conversations. They're exposed to sitting down and being able to come up with a solution, the restorative part of all of this stuff. And that's my part, so thank you guys.
So we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the direct connections between the things that we've been talking about and U.S. imperialism, and then I think we'll have a few little action things and open it up for questions. But one of the things that people don't often talk about with John Burge in particular is that he learned his torture tactics in Vietnam when he was in the army, right, and using that on Vietnamese people, and brought them back to Chicago, right? We are connected with folks in across the world now, really, who are survivors of torture at CTJC. And a friend of ours who I've known for a decade now is a survivor of torture in Chile. And recently, when Mark was talking about the black box that birds used to use on people to electrocute them, he said that same black box was used on him in Chile, right? So we know these same tactics of torture in policing have been used all across the world, right, and shared for decades. CPD is trained directly, right? Has trained directly with the IDF or Israeli Occupation Forces, right? IOF, as we're now saying, right? Since the early 2000s, right? This is a very direct connection of training and sharing tactics that they use on Palestinians and on poor black and brown people in Chicago, right? And I'll let Najee speak to prisons and Islamophobia post 9/11. Yes.
When I was in one prison, well, first it's just, I remember someone told me one time that, I guess he thought it was a compliment, but he say, oh, the prison did good for you because look where you at now in life. Look at this, look at that, and you have a new outlook and this and that. I was like, you missing the entire, it's just befuddles me that people are clueless. I said, you can see the name in it, Stateville Correctional Center, Illinois River Correctional Center, Menard Correctional Center. There's no correcting in there. There's nothing about correcting. And the prisons operate like states. Every prison is different. You might be able to go to school here, but in this prison, you can't go to school. Or you can't do this because of that. And for those reasons, the only thing that changed me as far as my mentality, besides the abuse, the first time a gun ever been put on me was by the police. I was 12 at the park. I couldn't tell my mother because I wasn't supposed to be at that park. They was trying to figure out who was in the building. They asking a 12-year-old. I don't know what's going on, but in retrospect, y'all was on a stake. Why is you asking me? Why you want to take me to a garage and do whatever you want to with me? So when I left Illinois River, Illinois Correctional Center, when I left them, because after 9/11, they did what they did. They was already abusing you anyway because of what they wanted. So what they did was they gathered up the Muslims who talk too much, the ones who write grievances and stuff, the ones who trying to get all these books in to read. And they wouldn't let me get it, so my white homie, he got them in for me, and I read them anyway, so that still worked out. But they sent me to segregation for an incident, for a speaking incident that I wasn't even a part of. But because I was there, they sent me to say it. I went there, it was like 15 other Muslims there. I'm like, man, what's going on down here? Man, they got me on indeterminate sentence. Huh? In segregation? They came and got me and sent me to Mount Sterling. I'm dropping names. Mount Sterling. Yeah. Correctional Center. I want to put that in there. You know, they correcting us in there. But this is what they did. They put me in the cell. No sooner you put me in SEG. About 2 weeks later, they shipped all us out. I was on the van by myself, and they took me to Mount Sterling, and they said, welcome to hell, which I felt like I was in hell anyway. You ain't really said nothing different. But they put me in the SEG in segregation with the white supremacists. Reason why I say I know he was a white supremacist because he had 3 hangman nooses on his arm. So when people tell me, like, how you know he's a white supremacist? Look on his arm. I was in there for about a month and a half. We never said one word to each other. It's smoking hot. You can't breathe, all that type of stuff. You can't even get out of cell. 8 by 9, you can't get out. You in there. A month and a half went by. Somehow we didn't get our food. We got to arguing about it. We don't know how we missed. We was asleep or something. That was the first conversation that we ever had. And we was finna go to blows, stabbing each other, all type of stuff. Then when we start banging on the doors, that's what we do. They don't like coming, like the brother said. They don't come because they feel you just want to get out your cell. That's what they feel like. And while I was there, a person, he was there and they maced him and he died. They said it was on him. However they tried to clean it up, he's gone and they living their life whatever. You know, this is, of course, 2001. So when we start kicking on the doors, that's when the police ran down there. They was like, oh, what's going on? Here come the CO. You can hear them running. They got the keys. You know how that sound. They coming. And when they came, they seen, we was like, where's our food at? We all missed it. Give them their food. A younger officer who came there, I don't know if he's still there or not, but he said, yeah, they was trying to get y'all to fight. They had a bet on it, and they do that. I know they do that, but that's what they were doing. And when they got us up, because it was all because not just of what I was doing, but also writing them up, but also because I was Muslim. And what I was doing was, they should be congratulating me to get people to go to school, to get people to stop this nonsense, just like the people that was there that had natural life who taught me the values of the world and about being a human. And when I had that incident, it just made me know more that we have to reach each other's humanity. Because after that, we wasn't best of friends or nothing. But at least after that, we start speaking to one another.
And this is Mark. Uh-oh, it don't want to cooperate. This is, Once again, this is Mark Clemens. And I just want to, maybe if I get back.
That's fine.
Turn that one. Now we are okay. Once again, this is Mark Clemens, and I just want to bring up an incident that took place with me. I've been out of prison for 16 years. I served every bit of my parole. And to now be told that I have to register on a Illinois state murder registry. Of course, I was reluctant, but I did. After serving this parole time and now registering, back in 2017, I checked with the police department to find out what day I would have to go in and to register. I was told that I was off of the list. There was no need to come in and to register. Well, in 2020, we did a protest outside of the Cook County Jail. It was, approximately 2,000 or 3,000 people. Well, I was fingered out by the FOP. Hey, how y'all doing? So they knew that this warrant had been taken out for my arrest. So they actually started a big-ass manhunt looking for Mark Clemens. They raided family, households. They end up finding me the next morning. No, I'm not answering my door. You can bang on the door all day long and say police, police all day. However, they did get a key. They came in. I was arrested for failure to register. Okay? Well, let me tell you, I recorded the conversation between me and that police officer. So if Fox was sitting right here in this seat, she's going to say, well, guess what? I don't bite down to anyone, including your governor, including your president of the U.S. of this stinking country. The bottom line of it is you took me into custody. You're listening on this tape, this police officer tell me that I've completed my registry. No kids here. Damn if the tape is good. Damn if the tape is no good. That's your laws. Your laws say that I have to inform someone that I'm taping them. Boo-boo, I didn't. Now you hear this conversation. What are you going to do? So yes, Fox dropped the charges, but I wanted to bring this point out to show you just how easy it is to be arrested when it is the police fault. So until, I'll say, the pandemic hit, you know, I was pretty vocal all over the city of Chicago. The pandemic hits. Uh-oh, I turn out like my natural age, an old man, meaning it had something to do with my body. In closing, to make sure that you wonderful people have your comments, I will say this. Change looks like to me you young people getting involved. It is so very important that you get involved. That don't mean that you gotta like me, but the issue is so very important because what about your brother? What about your father, your mother, your community? That's who this stuff affects. No, I'm not on the Illinois State Murder Registry. I could care less of the Illinois State Murder Registry because it is an illegal law that should have been never even approved by the General Assembly. However, it was approved by the General Assembly. So as a person who spent 28 years inside of a prison, raising hell inside of the prisons, and now coming back to this wonderful environment, and the reason I look around is because it's a lot of work to be done. What I'm asking of you people is to get involved. Get involved with the Chicago Torture Justice Center. Many of you know me as the torture survivor. Many of you know me as the Hellraiser. Well, what happens when the Hellraiser can't go anymore? It's very, very important to protect our community and our families. So please get involved with the Chicago Torture Justice Center. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Oh. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so as Mark said, I'm going to leave these up here for a second for folks to get. We do have a report on the Illinois Murder Registry that we wrote about a year ago, collected a lot of testimony, did a lot of research. So please check that out. I think it's really important for folks to educate themselves on this, especially because, as we've talked about, right, registries are largely supported by politicians and the general public, right? So, you know, it's good to know your stuff. We are trying to get a bill out in the spring around this. And so if you follow our socials, if you get on our mailing list, which is just at chicagotorturejustice.org at the bottom of the homepage, you can follow what we're doing and get involved when we have action days and things like that, lobby days. And then same for Building Communities Not Prisons. They have an involvement form that's there. I made a little bit.ly link for it. And there's a really important article that some friends and comrades of ours just wrote, Erica Miners, Beth Ritchie, and Ash Stevens, on why we shouldn't be spending more monies on revamping or building new prisons, and why we should close them instead and fund our communities. But we'll move to questions.
Beautiful. Can we just give another round of applause for our panelists? I wanted to, before we open up to the audience, I'm going to take some moderator privileges and ask one, maybe two of my own. But I wanted to expand on this point about connections and the connections between the U.S. Carceral system, the carceral state, and U.S. empire. and U.S. imperialism, right? And in some ways, I would say it's not a connection, but it's more of that process of finding the connections. It's more of a process of learning the ways that they are shared structures, right? Because, the first and the thing I first think about, especially that is particularly apt in this moment, is how we are seeing how the current administration is using the same kind of war on terror paradigm, right, to justify and manufacture consent for the genocide of Palestinians in Palestine, right? And it's not lost, it should not be lost on us that the same president that is using this paradigm of war on terror is the same president who was notorious for popularizing the quote-unquote super predator and shepherding the war on crime, right? And this is that the wave of truth in sentencing and the explosion of mass incarceration. We're talking about two sides of a shared strategy that is being applied domestically and internationally. And, I think one thing I'm not sure how many folks are seeing it because they've done a great job of hiding it in the mainstream media, but something that has been happening more recently in Palestine has been these reports of Israeli occupation forces committing acts of mass rape of Palestinian prisoners that have been detained, and brutalized rape. And what's turning lots of heads is that there's movements within Israel that are defending the soldiers that are now being prosecuted, who are literally mobilizing in their defense. And I bring that up because prisons, as I'm sure folks who are familiar with the U.S. prison system, the U.S. prison system is also a system of systemic rape and torture, as has already been alluded to on the stage. And I think kind of tying this all, in terms of the funding and the resources and direct material connections, we are funding that. We are funding the prison system, carceral system that is being used of the genocide. That same funding to explode our own mass incarceration system, not just at the federal level, but for folks who don't know, at the same time that J.B. Pritzker wants to spend $1 billion, almost $1 billion to build 2 new prisons in the state of Illinois, we also, at the state of Illinois also purchases over $120 million in Israel bonds to literally fund the incarceration and mass and torture that's happening in Israeli prisons. So the connections are plentiful, and they exist even in our own home state. It's the only foreign government that's receiving funds from our state treasurer of Illinois. And, I bring this up and I want to tie this back. Our last panel was called Sharpening the Tip of the Spear, Prison Abolitionism and Inside-Outside Resistance. The moderator of that panel, Yolanda, her grandfather is a Palestinian political prisoner who was imprisoned in Israel, but then also moved to the U.S. and was imprisoned in the U.S. as well. And she made a pretty powerful point that, a lot of folks talk about, oh, it's worse over there, it's worse over here. And from her grandfather's perspective, what she said is, no, it's the same. The only thing that's different in the U.S. is they've refined how to hide it better. It's been integrated into society so much farther, right? And I wanted to, this is a long context for my question, but I think in some ways how the violence of the prison has been normalized, so normalized in our culture, right? And also how the prison itself, the violence of the prison itself is now its ripple effect. It doesn't just exist in the brick and mortar prison, but the containment, surveillance, control, the harm of communities exists in all these different new tools and metrics, whether it's the murder registry, the MSR, and all these different ways. And so I'm wondering if any folks want to speak briefly about the invisible imprisonment and invisible prison that's kind of expanding in our communities, and how it's not just harming one person, not just harming you, but the entire community, family members, etc.
Well, I'll speak a little bit on that. I was arrested as well for that murder. I just don't speak on it because I get emotional kind of, because I was married and I had like a 3-4 month old child at the time. So I don't really speak on it. But even, like even in the report, it spoke about, it has in the report where it talks about how Israeli occupation force, IDF, what I say, occupation? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm in the right room, Before it wasn't in the right room, hey, well, hey, that's what it is, man. Sorry. But the Israeli occupation force, they came here openly. We was able to see it. We don't know how long they've been here, because we can go all the way back to Reagan when he said he didn't know what was going on. Y'all know the history. But when they train law enforcement, they not just training Army and Navy and all. They train in regular police officers, and guess what? Correctional officers. I was there when the change, you could see the change. You could see something is happening around. What's going on? And this is right before the towers. It was the Orange Crush is what we call them. They around in orange suits and, riot gear, and they come to knock your head off. That's what they do. They not come to talk, they come to demonstrate on you. And you could tell some of the tactics had changed. But when I spoke about when they sent me to segregation, and there was a lot of other Muslims there, what also they was doing, we send money to organizations that help Muslims or any other people. But if it's an Islamic organization and you sent money to them, they was taking you to segregation on some other trumped up stuff. I found out, because some of the officers there, they work in there, but some of them, they start thinking and they starting to, get away from it and everything. So what happens is we think it's something good. Like, oh, look what happened. No, look what's been happening. And I had the pleasure of speaking to a Palestinian man closely 30 years ago to understand what was going on. I didn't know what's going on, but he told me about it. But when you see this in prison, and on my release, the first time I was coming to let them know where I live and all this other stuff, the feds was there asking me questions about 2 people from the prison I was in. The first thing I told them, y'all need to leave. I don't have nothing to talk about. So for the first 6-8 months, I promise you I was being followed. Every time I turned around, just like when they pulled me, when they took me in that time, and it was a few years after, it was a couple of years after I've been released. I've been out like almost 7 years now. And what they did was, they said my the turn signal, all this other stuff, that's when they arrested me. But that's when I'm just thinking like, they still messing with me. And what they do in there is, you can't get certain books in that talks about revolution, that talks about the humanity of people. You can't see these you can't get those type of books in. So it's rampant through the community. You could tell when they come with and what bothers me so much right now is, it still bothers me. It happened a few months ago, they were talking about it, where Israeli occupation force, Netanyahu now, and they arguing with the president, Joe Biden, about how many big bombs they can get. They debating on how many bombs, the bigger bombs that they need to kill more people. Biden told them no, but he's still sending them the little ones to bomb everybody. But you can't get this massive bomb. They debated and argued that for months. Why? We have to wake the community up. We have to wake the nation up and forget about how you grew up or what's going on, because you have to go to the side of humanity. You cannot stand, we all cannot stand for this. So in closing, that's what I want. We have to stop letting people invoke fear in us and start looking at this stuff in humanity and start building up our education when it comes to these issues, and just stop listening to the jargon.
Thank you. I think, Javier, if you wanted to make a comment, then we'll open up to the...
How the invisible effects of incarceration. First, I'll give you 3 obstacles: employment, housing, and education. We just fought to get the Pell Grant back for people with convictions on their records. I don't know if you guys didn't know that, but if you had a conviction on your record, you could not go to school to get a Pell Grant. So we fought and took it to Springfield, and that was overturned. And now people with convictions on their records can apply for Pell Grants and go to school. A second one is a second one is employment. Say us 3 go to fill out an application, and I might got an education from Northwestern. I got a master's degree, and he has a bachelor's, she has an associate. We're all going for this job, and the first thing that's going to disqualify me is my conviction. So no matter how much school I have, the system will not allow me to enter. So there's this invisible barrier that he mentioned that exists. And now we're going into housing, a basic thing where someone can lay their head down and be safe at. So no matter even if I educate you in prison, I give you all the resources that you need, but then I let you go back home, and if it's not on your mother's couch, you're not living anywhere else. The system was not designed for women at all. There's no studies, there's nothing that can support that would show that women were taken into consideration when prisons were built, designed, implemented, or whatever you want to call it. 2 years ago, a study was released that 87% of the women incarcerated in Illinois are victims of violence. These are women who were defending themselves, and we incarcerated them. So we usually don't talk about the women, but we have done such an injustice to women in the state of Illinois. And across this country, even going to Palestine and hearing the atrocities inflicted by those who have sworn an oath to protect, in all capacity, human life. So those are some of the long-lasting just deterrents that anyone with a conviction, and here in Illinois, there's over 4.9 million people who have a conviction on their record. And a conviction, we're talking about a misdemeanor. We're talking about you shoplifted when you were 15 years old, and now you're 30 and you're being denied a job because you have a conviction for shoplifting with a bunch of friends or as a joke. So these long-lasting punishments are just invisible barriers that every day when I wake up in the morning, I have to deal with.
Thank you. All right. Your comment just made me want, I think we need to start talking about how prisons are death camps for the poor. Prisons are, we're talking about poverty. We're just incarcerating poverty. And that is a policy choice. That's a policy choice, that an intentional organization of poverty, impoverishment in certain communities that have been deemed unworthy of access to resources and life and living. But with that, we have a mic runner to open up. We have time for a couple questions. Maybe we could take 2 to 3 questions, and then we'll open up to the panelists to kind of pick and choose if you want to hit on or riff on which ones.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for everything you've shared so far. I'm going to keep my question very short and simple. What, if you got control of the funds that are currently funding all of the violence and isolation and harm in Illinois prisons, what would you spend that money on instead? What would you pour that money into?
And I don't think I need this, but for the audio. But I would seriously.
Why don't we do, since we're.
Oh, he won't. They want it so important. I would invest into the poorest communities of Chicago. Housing. And if I didn't give it to housing, it definitely would go to health care. We are wasting entirely too much money. $900 million, and a governor sits here and sells you that piece of BS, as well as we have a vice president right now who uses this term predator. But hold on, didn't we get on Hillary for that? Didn't we get on other lawmakers for that? But we're over here down the street basically kissing their ass. We have to change that narrative. Here it is, you have a vice president that is responsible for all these wrongful convictions, and people are sitting back dancing and jumping with these criminals, because that's exactly what these people are. And let's keep in mind, as the death penalty was repealed here in 2011, the death penalty remained on the books in the state of California. And how I grew to learn Mrs. Criminal is due to the fact of several people on death row in California in which she did not lift one finger to help those individuals. But I would definitely give the money to the poorest communities in the city of Chicago. And if they were doing that right now, I don't think that the outcry over this Illinois State Murder Registry would be so great. This is a piece of legislation that never should have gotten enacted. It was what they say, tib for tab, due to the fact that they wanted to try to get a young man to serve more time behind prison walls, and they attacked everyone but him.
If I can add to that, there's an underlying problem. No one wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I want to just sell drugs or not go to school. There's a lot of trauma in our communities. I've lost, well, I'll take this back. In the early 90s, I was losing friends to gun violence. Now I'm losing friends to fentanyl. Those that survived the streets of gun violence are now dying with a man-made drug that's being pushed into our communities. So the money has to go to mental health. We have to deal with the underlying problems. We have to open up all of these clinics that were in our communities that were closed, where someone can go and see a doctor and talk about their mental health. And that's something that we're not doing. We've really messed up this country in such a way that it's affecting our youth at such a high rate. There's never been an era where people wanted to kill themselves so much. And we're not addressing that. We're talking about kids who think that it's so terrible that they rather not wake up and hug their mother. They rather not just get up and start a normal day, that they rather not be here. At what point do we and Naj touched on humanity, when do we say like just ni uno más, right? Not one more, right? Nobody should have to just experience that type of lifestyle in this country. And we're so great, you know, we're a superpower, right? We have billionaires that are all over this country, you know. We have the best doctors, the best technology. We have the best of everything. But we don't have the best common sense. And that's destroying our communities. That's destroying our youth. That's destroying our perception on what's right or wrong. And we're not respecting the young voices that are screaming at them, that are yelling at them, that they're organizing, that they're going into the streets and putting their bodies in danger. Right? Not only for what's happening here, but what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in other countries. We're not sitting idle no more, just watching this shit happen. We're just not. You guys are not. And that ignites us, the older guys. Like he says, I can't. And man, I see the fire in our youth today, and how can I not stand with them? I got a little bit of time left on this earth, right? Why not spend them being part of the solution versus the problem?
Great question, great question. And what comes when a wish is hopefully we can find solutions, because we can always wish things, but what about the solution? So I love that question. And over 60% of Illinois prisons come from 6 communities. So they know this. They seen the study. I'm not nobody. Y'all, they the ones got all the PhDs and all this other stuff. They know this. If they want to do something about it, they can turn right around and do it. And those 6 neighborhoods, Austin, North Lawndale, Inglewood, Roseland, Humboldt Park, West Garfield, over 60%. You could take half of that bill, that $800 million, and put it into those communities. When it comes to school, education, good books, not the old beat up ones, old computers. But not only that, what about vocational skills and trades? Because a lot of the youth, and I work with a lot of the youth, they always trying to find something new to do on YouTube or TikTok. Because all the trades and the skills that you can learn in vocational schools are gone. Where are the mechanic schools that have mechanics in there and learn about how to build trucks and stuff? Where is that at? It's not there. 60%. If we can look over 60% at these 6 communities, most of it is solved. But that's not the way it works right now, because it's all about the money. That's what it's all about. We got to squeeze as much as we can from the poor and disinvested communities and say, it's y'all fault. You should have pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what you should have did. Instead of putting money where it should go, instead of creating more bombs to bomb and kill more poor people or more countries. And when the migrants come, everybody's surprised. Where have you been? They've been dropping bombs everywhere. They have been usurping democratically elected officials. But if we keep on listening to the fearmonger, oh, look what Muammar Gaddafi doing. What he doing, healthcare? What he doing? Show me something, don't tell me. Don't bring me back to the plains. Y'all already discussed that. What he doing now? What is going on now? And when you start talking about creating your own currency in Africa, changing no, we're not finna do any of that. So it's all about, when I hear this, because I watch all kind of news, I'm independent, Democrat nor Republican, but I listen to everybody. I know some people that can't stomach listen to Fox News. I listen to it until I can't stomach it no more. But what it says, you would hear a lot, because they tell you it would always be poor people. Why do people say that all the time? What you mean by poor? In dollars or mentally? What you mean? So they don't get to what you mean, but we see what they're doing financially and otherwise.
He touched on something real important on immigration. If you think back on Ellis Island, when all of Europe came into this country, and the reception they received, the Statue of Liberty, all these boats, all these people lined up just to give you automatic citizenship. This is all of Europe. But here comes a darker class of people into this country the same way, in drones, hundreds of thousands, just like in Ellis Island back in New York. And look at the indifference of how that population was treated and to the population of immigrants that are coming in now. They're criminalizing them through the door. Over there you had to register. They didn't even care if you had an ID. They didn't even care if you had a name. Whatever name you wanted to pick, that was your name. Pinocchio, that's my name, right? It wasn't a big deal to allow someone who was fleeing from persecution to come to the world's melting pot to look for a better life. But that's not the case no more, because it's all about money. So we're treating a whole class of people that is coming to this country the same way they did back then in Ellis Island, and we're criminalizing them. We're not allowing them to work. We're not giving them housing. But we're telling them, hey, you guys are going to be all right. So that's not all right.
To close this out, I'm thinking a lot about how one of the biggest lessons I've learned and things I've admired about the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian struggle has been the forefronting of the importance of supporting political prisoners, Palestinian political prisoners, and the way that in the Palestinian movement, political prisoners and leaders within the prisoner movement, both inside the prison and outside, are honored. The community, and are thought of as the heartbeat of the movement. And I would just say, I would urge our everybody listening in our community and our movement to, that this is our heartbeat right here. And we gotta tap in and get involved. So I appreciate y'all so much for this panel. This is beautiful. Give it up for our folks.
And we want to say thank you to all of you for coming, and thank you so much to Dissenters and everyone who's worked on this counter conference. It's amazing to be a part of, so we appreciate it. And all of our emails are here if y'all want to follow up with any of us about any of this work. And thanks so much, Timmy.
And we should a big shout out to Lumpen TV. They're amazing. So everybody's been logging on. So if you haven't, go see these gentlemen. Get this website. Get involved. They're bringing you up-to-date information where it's not watered down. You're getting it from the people, right? So log into it's lumpen.tv.
Thanks, y'all.
One last thing. I have some Know Your Rights cards. It's not just for yourself. It's for your family member. I'm going to pass them out if someone is arrested, or if someone you know that is arrested. You can call this number. They'll get a lawyer right there to whatever police station they're at. And it has 3 magic phrases on here of knowing your rights. Am I free to go? I will not talk. I want my lawyer. And I don't consent to any searches.